My name's Ian Howick and I'm here to talk about the family history tree that I've completed for my father, who is John Peter Howick. So in a minute I'm actually going to show you the full-size tree that we designed and finished back in 2012. I've come to Outwood. I'm standing here in Outwood in Surrey, which is quite an inaccessible place really when you don't drive. I'm standing actually opposite the windmill, which is in the background, and in a minute I'm going to take you through the Howick family tree. Over there in the distance you can hopefully see the Outwood sign with the windmill on it, and also you can see a modern building, I hope, which is over there, which is called the Chapter House today, but that was the old Outwood Baptist Chapel. So in a minute I'm going to show you the family tree. So let's just do a pan round back at the windmill, and I hope you enjoy this film. Okay, so this is the Howick family tree, and I'm going to try and explain it. So you're just going to see my finger dart in front of the camera from time to time. So here we have John Howick at the top, who was born 1779, and we have Mary Edgington, who was born 1786, and we've got back as far as 1805, which is when John Howick married Mary Edgington, which was in the parish of Godstone, which is just up the road from this spot. So they really are the two Howicks that started off the family tree. They had two children, you can see below, John, who was born in 1807, and William, who was born in 1809. And John Howick married Sarah Sargent, who was born in 1808, and they married on the 29th of the 9th, 1827. So that's the sort of the start of the tree. So 1805 is as far back as we've got. Now if you come down to the next line, you can see that the children that John and Sarah Sargent had were quite a lot. They had a lot of children. So we've got Mary, who was born in 1830. We've got Henry, who was born in 1832. We have John, who was born in 1835. We have Obed, who was born in 1837. We have Robert, who was born in 1840. We have Joseph, who was born in 1842. We have Abraham, who was born in 1845. And we have Jesse, who was born in 1850. And if you look at the tree, you can see that the line takes us down. So Obed, born in 1837, married a lady by the name of Mary Ann Dungate, and she was born in 1838. Now if we come down to the next line, Obed Howick and Mary Ann Dungate, as you can probably see now, had a lot more children. So they had Mary, who was born in 1857, Obed, who was born in 1859, Elizabeth, who was born in 1860, William, who was born in 1864, Daniel, who was born in 1866, David, who was born in 1868, Louisa, born in 1871, and Arthur Ernest, who was born in 1877. And then if you look at the tree, Daniel Howick, who was born in 1866, met Alice Eliza Belton, who was born in 1868, and they were married on the 28th of the 9th, 1889. Then if we come down to the next level, Alice and Daniel had the following children. So we have Mary Louisa, born in 1890, Nellie, born in 1892, Annie Elizabeth, born in 1893, George, born in 1897, Mary Ann, born in 1899, William John, born in 1901, and Arthur Daniel, born in 1908. And it was George, born in 1897, who met and married Rosemary Ann Wheel, who was born in 1900. And they were married on the 2nd of the 1st, 1928. And then if you come down the last piece of the tree, you can see where my father sits. So George Howick and Rosemary Ann Wheel, who married in 1928, had Joan Mary Howick, born 1928, John Peter Howick, born 1930, Raymond George Howick, born 1933, and Michael Howick, born 1942. And that brings us up to my father. So if we just pan away so we can see the whole of the tree, as you can see, it's quite a complex piece. Outwood is actually located in the old parish of Burstow. So all of this area here is in fact the old parish of Burstow. You've got Nutfield a short distance from here. This is Outwood. Godstone is a bit further on. And all of my father's ancestors came from this area. They lived round here. I think at one time, this is Outwood Common that I'm standing on now, and I think at one stage there probably would have been a lot more cottages, a lot more houses. Certainly the census records reveal that to be true. There were, I think, a lot more wooden cottages across this area. This is what's left today. If you go to any of the local churchyards or cemeteries around here, you'll find that nearly all of the headstones bear the surname Howick, which is our family surname. There's a church over in sort of that direction where Obed Howick is buried. Over there is the chapter house, which is where a lot of my father's ancestors were buried, in the old Baptist chapel cemetery there, churchyard. Sadly, the cemetery was uprooted many years ago, and none of my father's ancestors' headstones still exist. And as I've shown you in an earlier clip, a lot of the headstones have gone, which is something I'm going to be following up. So this is the year 2016, this is the end of August when I'm actually filming this. I'm just going to slowly pan round, just so you can get an idea of Outwood Common and how it looks today. I think this part of Surrey is very much unchanged. There's a lot of modern traffic, obviously, but the actual environment is still pretty much the same. It's still very green, very pretty, you know, a very nice part of the English landscape. So here's a quick shot of the windmill, a bit of footage of the windmill, and then I'm going to pan round, and there's the chapter house, which was the old Baptist chapel in the distance. And there's the chapter house as it is today. That was the Outwood Baptist Chapel to the left of the picture. And if I pan round slowly, there's the windmill. Just a quick bit of footage of St John the Baptist in Outwood. On this beautiful hot day, and there's the clock tower. Look at that sky, isn't it beautiful? And we're just going to have a look at the grave of Obed Howick, who is buried here. This is Obed. And this is St John the Baptist, Outward. On a very, very hot day, September 2016. This is the grave of Obed Howick. Obed, underneath Howick, you can read. Obed Howick. The stone is a little bit damaged. Let's just go down. And I think you can see his name. There you go again. I think above it says Mary. Mary Howick. You can just make that out in the stone. Now, you've already seen a clip at this point of the grave of Obed Howick, but here it is, and Obed features on my father's tree. We've already looked at Obed at this point. The grave of Obed Howick. Just get a nice shot of St John the Baptist outward. And this is where Obed Howick is buried and where his grave is. Some beautiful flowers on the back of the church there. It's a beautiful old church. So here I am back in February 2017, back at St John the Baptist in Outwood, and I'm back here today. They've kindly allowed me to film inside the church, which I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to be looking at the Howick Family Bible, which is a wonderful old book that we have. I'm not sure how we inherited it, but it sat in our bookcase at home. So I'm going to be looking at the family Bible, and I'm going to be placing the Bible on a lectern inside the church, and we're going to be looking at some of the names of the Howick ancestors, some of whom you will have already seen on the family tree that I drew. You will have seen that at this point of watching my video. So I'm just waiting now to be let into the church. And the Outwood Baptist Chapel, where my father's grandfather, Daniel Howick, sort of took sermons, stood in for the rector when he wasn't able to take service. we're not a huge distance from where the Baptist chapel is, and I think it's fair to assume that a lot of the Howicks would have worshipped here. They would have been parishioners here. This would have been their local church. There are still photos already featured in my video which you may have seen, but it's actually nice to get a bit of moving footage of some of these places, which is partly what I've come back here to do today, as well as to look at the family Bible for the Howicks. Apart from the grave of Obed Howick, who's buried just by the porch, I can't actually see any other Howicks buried here. I've looked in the cemetery. I do know, and have already shown you, what happened to the graves of my father's ancestors who were buried in the grounds of the Baptist chapel, which is now a private property, which is called the Chapter House. And I've shown you how the Baptist Union of Great Britain uploaded those stones. So let's just have another little walk back. Pretty little tree which will be in blossom soon, I expect. And here's a slightly different angle and view of the other side of St John the Baptist in Outwood, which was a view we weren't really able to get when I came here with my parents to take still photos. There just wasn't time. So, let's go into the church. So here I am in the beautiful old church of St John the Baptist in Outwood. They've very, very kindly allowed me into the church today to film a piece about the Howick family Bible, which I've brought with me. I'm standing in the pulpit filming this little sequence. It really is very, very kind of them to allow me access to the church and to give me the space to do this. The reason it's so lovely to bring the family Bible here is because the Howicks, as my research has shown, all originated from this area. They lived, they farmed the land. Certainly, you know, the church is the focus of the community, and I feel sure, standing here now, I can feel some of my father's ancestors with me, which is a really nice feeling, actually. It's a lovely, quiet, peaceful church. Just up the road from here is Scott's Hill, where Pagefield's cottage stands, and you'll see footage of Pagefield's cottage a little bit later on in my film. Pagefield's cottage is where George Howick and Rosemary Ann Wheel were living when they got married in the year 1928. In the other direction, just up in the other direction, you've got Outwood Common, where Outwood Windmill stands, and it's also where the Baptist Chapel stands. And the Baptist Chapel, of course, is very relevant to my father's family history, because Daniel Howick, my father's grandfather, was sort of a part-time service taker. He was certainly the curator of the Baptist Chapel throughout his life. He lived there with his wife Alice Eliza Belton, Alice Eliza Howick. So, you know, there's all sorts of farms and cottages. Hale Farm is sort of on the borders of Nutfield, which again isn't a huge distance from here. You also have Doggets or Doghurst Farm, where Abraham Howick had the lease and farmed. You've got Daisy's Hill just up the road, and Greenmead's Farm, which is where my aunt, Joan Mary Howick, was born. And, you know, it's the whole area is just very, very relevant to the Howick family history. So we're going to go over now to the lectern, and we're going to have a look at the Howick family Bible, and we're going to look at some of the names. And at this point in the video, you will have seen the family tree that I showed you right back at the beginning of this film, and you'll recognise some of the names from the family tree about the Howicks. Let's go and take a look. So here we have on the lectern in the church the Howick family Bible. I mean, it's just a wonderful, wonderful old book. There you have Alice Belton's name, dated 1887. Look at that. The wonderful thing about these family Bibles is that what used to happen is the Bible was passed down from generation to generation, and people used to add their names and their signatures. So we're just going to have a look. There you've got Daniel Howick at the top. It's just fantastic. You've got Alice Howick. And what used to happen was generations used to pass the Bible on so that the next generation could record their names. And, you know, already this Bible is aging. The paper is parchment thin. So it's brilliant to be able to come and place it on a lectern and just have a proper look at this. You'll recognise a lot of these names from the family tree I showed you earlier. We even have some of the Beltons have written in here. There's the recorded death of Alice Eliza Howick, Alice Eliza Belton at the top. So just a wonderful, wonderful old book to have in our collection. Very, very precious. So here we have a wonderful book that I've just been shown, and it's actually the baptism record for the parish of Outwood. And if you look just here, you can see that my father's baptism record is right in front of you. Look at that. Gentleman's just kindly found it for me. So there we have my dad, John Peter Howick, born to George Howick and Rosemary Ann Wheel. There's the surname in the next box. Now, interestingly, I thought that they were living at Pagefield's cottage, which is just up the road from where I'm standing now on Scott's Hill in Outwood. But looking at this record now, this doesn't look like Pagefield's. So I'm going to have to do a little more research on this and see if I can find out where this cottage is. Fascinating. It's something cottage, and it looks like something Lee Cottage, Outwood. So there's a bit more research to be done there. And let's go along the line. And it says that George Howick's occupation, which is nice to see, is a chauffeur at this point. Now we have a photo at home of him in his chauffeur's uniform, looking very smart and standing in front of a very nice car. It would be interesting to know where he was a chauffeur. Maybe they were living at this address at the time that George Howick was chauffeuring. So it looks like there's a bit more work for me to do there. Just going to go a little bit closer on the cottage. So that's fascinating. A bit more work to do there, I feel. So there you go, chauffeur. And there's the name of the vicar who presided at the baptism. And if I just pull back slowly, you can see this wonderful old record in book form, which is just amazing. And the gentleman that has let me into the church very kindly went and found this, looked this up. There it is sitting on the lectern. So how wonderful is that? Let's just have one more look. I've really enjoyed coming here today and being allowed to film in this beautiful, beautiful old church. So our time here is coming to an end. I've got the footage that I wanted to get. So I'm going to send out a little prayer to all the Howicks. I feel sure that they're with me now, a lot of them, and watching me, and hopefully appreciating all the work and effort I've put into this research and into the film. So that's it. I've thoroughly enjoyed my visit here today. Thank you. So you're going to hear the sound of a gentleman mowing the lawn in the background, but this is the remains of the headstones of the Howick ancestors. So this gravestone that we're looking at now is in loving memory of Joseph Howick, who died, I think it's April the 14th, 1893. I'll try and go in on the Howick surname, and you can see the date of death underneath. A lot of these stones are deteriorating because time's passing by now, which is really why I've come here today to get footage. They're not all Howicks. Some of these these stones commemorate the memory of other people's ancestors. I'm just going to sort of go along and have a look. I'm going to have a look and see if I can find the little boy who drowned in the pond at Mason's Bridge Farm. That was little John Howick. It is very, very sad really to come here and find, you know, all that's left of these stones, but we're going to go along and we're going to have a look and see. Right, so this is the headstone of Abraham Howick. Let's go down here. There's Abraham, and it says, also in ever-loving memory of Abraham Howick, husband of the above, who departed this life April the 17th, 1917, aged 72 years. And actually that's quite clear. If I go in there, you can see the name Abraham Howick. And if I move up, you can see it says, ever-loving memory of Mercy Lee Howick, who departed this life August the 1st, I think it's 1914, aged 66 years. So you've got Mercy Lee and Abraham underneath. So it is very, very sad to see these stones, and of course I'm standing in front of the garden. If I turn the camera around and look back and show you the garden, this is the chapter house in the distance, and in fact it's this was the Baptist chapel. So under the lawn there is buried all of my father's ancestors, but the graves, the actual grave plots are no longer marked. So it was a very nice chap who I just spoke to, and as you can see, this is how they all look. I've taken still photos of this area, but the still photos were taken quite some while ago. So, you know, I've come here today just to get some video footage. And as you can see, a lot of these stones are now getting covered in moss and all sorts of stuff that's obscuring the writing, but if you look, you can see there's Mary Ann Howick, died April the 16th, I think it says 19, it could either be 1919 or 1949, I'm not sure. Let's go a little bit closer. 1949 it looks like on the camera. But as you can see, they're all getting covered in moss. And it's not just Howicks that are buried here. There's Frank Howick. I've got photos of that, I think, previously. You know, there's other people's ancestors are buried here as well. But this is hardly a garden of remembrance. So you can see how the Baptist Union basically, you know, they said they created a garden of remembrance, but you know, I'm videoing along these gravestones just so you can see what they actually did. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, how they can call this a garden of remembrance. The stones are just piled up, many of them back to back. It's just ridiculous. In fact, if I turn the camera around, you can see clearly that this really isn't a garden of remembrance. You see how the stones are all layered back to back. So there you have all the stones. This is from the other side. It certainly looks better in the sunshine, but No, it's not ideal. So if I turn the camera around and just show you over the hedge, there in the distance is what is now called the chapter house, which is a private house, but that used to be the Outward Baptist Chapel. And they've got two archways. They have a dog, an Airedale, who barked at me when I came in here. But as you can see, you have to be careful because the garden is open. So the space that we're now looking at was the Baptist Chapel Cemetery, and I actually have in my paper records a plan of the cemetery and where all the bodies were buried. So already, despite there only having been a few years since I came here and took photos, already there's been a lot of change along here. You know, there's now new occupants. And obviously they've made changes. I'm just going to take a quick shot while he's facing in the other direction of the back of the Baptist Chapel. That's the view through the arch. So here we have, this is quite interesting. I came here before, I didn't video all this stone. I've climbed round the back. As I say, I do have still photos of this, but if you look here, it says on this stone, at the top it says Eliza, the beloved wife of Mr. C.J. Brun of Greenwich, Kent, who peacefully fell asleep February the 9th, 1896, aged 64 years. Her last words were, "I will love thee, O Lord, my strength continue, yea, in my love." And then underneath it says, also of John Howick, 7th son of A and M Howick, and A and M Howick, of course, were Abraham and Mercy Lee Howick, who was accidentally drowned in the pond, in the Round Pond, in Mason's Bridge Farm, June the 21st, 1899, aged 6 years and 6 months. So I'm just going to go up. So there you go, also of John Howick, 7th son of A and M Howick, and that's Abraham and Mercy Lee Howick. And if I go down, who was accidentally drowned in the Round Pond in Mason's Bridge Farm, June the 21st, 1893. Aged 6 years and 6 months. And it's just dreadfully, dreadfully sad to see this stone like this. It's actually quite hard to film this stone because I'm having to get back near sort of brambles and all sorts of things, so I'm just trying to get some as clear a footage as I can of it. As I say, I do have some still photos in this video as well, but just terribly, terribly sad. When of course this stone really should be marking the spot where the little boy died. So I actually have the newspaper cutting that reports this little boy's death from the actual year that it happened. Outward is quite a long way for me to come, so you know it's quite important to get this kind of footage today, because it's not something that, you know, one can come back every 5 minutes and do. So as you can see, these stones, you know, have just been dumped here. Yeah, it's just not great. Here I am at Nutfield train station. I'm very lucky with the weather, it's a gorgeous day. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and walk from here, the train station, and walk round to the location of Abraham Howick's coal yard. I'm going to try and do it all in one take. It depends obviously if any traffic gets in the way, but that's what I'm going to try and do. So we're going to start off here, and Abraham's coal yard was just to the back of me. It should be in the picture now, where the modern estate is built. The coal would have undoubtedly come in on here on the railway and been offloaded probably from coal trucks onto a lorry, and then we're going to go and have a look at the coal yard entrance, which is located in the road round the back of here, and we're going to go and have a look. So let's go and see. The reason I'm going to try and do this on camera all in one take is because I want to give you an idea in this video of, you know, how the coal was actually delivered here, how long it took them to transport the coal from here round to the other side, round to the actual coal yard. And I just felt that doing this in one take would be a good idea. It's not far. So we're going to walk round here. If I just pause here, you can see behind me modern properties. That's the estate where the Abraham's coal yard was located, and the land is very dipped around there if you go around there and have a look at it. So this is a very quiet little train station. It's very pleasant. So we're just coming out of the train station. You should be able to see the station platform behind me, and then so to the rear of me is where the coal yard actually was located. That was it. I think this little modern entrance is, this little road is probably modern, but we're going to have a look round. You're probably going to hear some aircraft going over, because of course Red Hill Aerodrome is quite near to here. So I apologise for the background noise, but we're going to try and overcome that. I mean, it's conceivable that some of the coal trucks perhaps were driven along this road. Now, the reason that I know where the coal yard entrance was located was because I met a couple who live on the other side of the train station, and they'd lived here for a number of years, and they actually one of them was had been a serving police officer. He was retired, and his surname was Howick, and he knew a little bit about the Howick ancestry, and he brought me round here in the dusk on a very dark evening and sort of showed me where everything was. So we're going to turn into a private road in a minute, which is called Morris Road. We're on foot, so we shouldn't get into trouble, but I'm going to sort of show you where Abraham's coal yard entrance was. Just going to move out of the way of a car. Now, the other thing I'm going to show you as well is the two properties that Abraham built. Abraham Howick was sort of the forerunner of a modern property contractor, and he built two of the properties up here. So we're going to just pause here, and if you look behind me you can see a large wide driveway, and that was the entrance to Abraham Howick's coal yard. As you can see, it is a wide entrance, and it's still unchanged, and that's where the entrance to his coal yard was. So I'm assuming that if the coal was unloaded off of the railway trucks, a lorry would have driven round here and driven up the drive there. It's interesting that the drive that's there now is still the same width so the width is, you know, the same width as the coal yard would have been. So we're going to walk a bit further along, and I'm going to try and point out where the two properties were that Abraham built. It's interesting that he built the properties just a bit further along from where the coal yard was. I think I can remember which two properties it is. So I think that it's the two properties behind me, which are numbers 20 and 21. So I think it's those two properties there that Abraham actually built. And as you can see, if you look back, if I turn the camera this way and you look back, the entrance to Abraham Howick's coal yard was just a bit further back that way. So it's really interesting to come here and see, you know, the geographical layout of it all. Hopefully you can see that clearly in the picture. So there are also still photos that I've taken that show you what these two properties look like. But they are the two properties, numbers 20 and 18. Sorry, I got that wrong. I said they were numbers 20 and 21. They're numbers 20 and 18. And those are the two properties that Abraham had built. I don't think he lived here. He lived the other side of Nutfield train station in Trindles Road. What we're going to do now is we're going to walk back along here. So we're going to walk back past the entrance to the coal yard. So we'll just have a last look at the two properties that Abraham built, which are numbers 20 and 18 behind me. And then we're going to walk back along, and I'm going to actually walk into the little cul-de-sac, which is where Abraham's coal yard was actually located. So we're just going to walk back along here. We'll stop and have a look at the entrance to Abraham's coal yard again. Yes, so there you have it. There's the entrance to the coal yard as was. So you can see that if you drove through there, you would have actually ended up on Nutfield train station platform, which is just the other side of the bungalow. So you can see how the coal yard was actually accessed or accessible. We're now going to walk back along, and we're just going to get a bit of footage. This bit of video footage just gives you a geographical idea of where everything is located, because that's what you don't get from still photographs, of course. You don't get that sense of geographical location. This is now a private drive. It's for residents, really, parking, so it's just as well I didn't come here by car, but it's called Morris Road. So let's just do a shot behind me. So we're going to walk back round, which is back up this way. The police officer to whom I spoke was actually related to Oliver Howick, and I did find the headstone of Oliver Howick's grave in just outside the Outwood Baptist Chapel. It was one of the gravestones that was, you know, uprooted. I've made various inquiries as to, you know, what can be done about that, because the Outwood, the Baptist Union of Great Britain is responsible for that damage. I think we've got another plane going over. Sorry, it's a bit noisy, I know. I think we can say we're on the flight path of somewhere. Right, so if I just pause here, and if you look behind me again, you can see that is where the coal yard was. So the entrance to the coal yard was through where the bungalow was I showed you just now in the video, and then if we walk along, hopefully we'll sort of get a general view. So here we are back at Nutfield train station, and if I turn the camera around here, there behind me is where Abraham's coal yard was. Now I can't see where the bungalow, the back garden of the bungalow. Ah, yes I can. So if I raise the camera up high, you should be able to see the top of the bungalow. So this is now looking at it from the other side, and I'm assuming that the entrance came through here, probably through this bit here. So the lorries or vans or whatever it was, coal trucks, would have driven into here. And if I turn around again, you can see behind me how the land sits. So the coal trucks would have come in here. So this is a view of Nutfield train station. It's a very pretty, peaceful, quite sleepy little train station. If you look to the left hand side of the picture, you can actually see a modern housing estate, and that's where Abraham Howick had his coal yard, my father John Peter Howick's ancestor. So presumably the coal was brought in here and offloaded into the coal yard. In those days, of course, this estate wouldn't have been here, and there are still photos that I've taken that show you what the coal yard looked like. We're actually looking at it now, it's in the picture, and if you look at how the land sits, you can see that actually it's slightly uneven, the surface, if you look at the ground, and that's because that's where the coal heaps sat. So of course the land is slightly dipped. Presumably the coal would have come in on steam trains, which was the mode of transport back then, and I presume either would have been unloaded manually, or the side of the coal trucks would have tipped up and perhaps put onto a lorry. I know that the entrance to the coal yard was somewhere to the left. And here's a view of the approximate site of Abraham Howick's coal yard, looking from the other direction. So I'm assuming that the coal would have come down here on a steam train, and at some point would have stopped and been offloaded somewhere around here, somewhere on this side of the station. The coal yard entrance is back on the other side, as are the two properties that Abraham actually built, because he was a sort of forerunner of what would have been a contractor, really. He was a builder as well as being a farmer, and in this video you've already seen some of the farms that Abraham owned and farmed. Now I'm just going to point, the property you can see there, you can see two properties. The one on the left, just there where my finger is, that is called Weymouth Villas, and that's where Abraham Howick actually lived. He lived on the corner of Trindle's Road, which is where a lot of the Howicks were living at this point. And there goes a train into the distance. Standing on this footbridge gives you quite a good geographical view, and there are lots of still photos that I've taken that give you an idea of what the station looks like. But this is good because if I turn the camera this way, over there, where my finger's pointing, that's where Abraham Howick's coal yard was. And again, if you go over there and look at the way that the land lies, you can see how humped the land is. And if we come back over this way, let's turn the camera around. If you look over there, those two properties there, that one on the left is where Abraham Howick lived. That's Weymouth Villas, and that's right on the corner of Trindle's Road. And it's interesting that the surname Howick was very common round here, and a lot of the Howicks lived in Trindle's Road, which carries on just round the corner there. Just come to a slightly different vantage point just to give you a slightly different perspective of what the area looks like. Because the purpose of my short films really is, it's one thing to show how something looks like in a still picture, but it's another thing entirely to show you as a moving image. So we've come back to Nutfield train station in Surrey, and I'm going to walk you round to Trindle's Road, which is where Abraham Howick lived. We looked at the other side of the train station in the last little clip, where we looked at Abraham Howick's coal yard, but I just wanted to come back to Nutfield to give you a bit of a geographical idea of how far Trindle's Road is from the train station, so you get an idea of how the coal was possibly offloaded. So we're going to walk back now, and I'm going to show you where Trindle's Road is, and hopefully this clip will give you a sort of more of an idea of how near everything was located. Because of course in those days the mode of transport was horse and cart. You know, this was before the motor car, so you know, a lot of people that lived in sort of rural areas like this relied on you know, either being able to walk places or use a horse and cart. So I'm just going to walk you round to where Trindle's Road is. I'm lucky with the weather again because it's nearly October now. We're coming up to October. So where I'm turning into now is Trindle's Road. And Abraham lived on the corner. Weymouth Villas is just on the corner. And then just a bit further on is actually Trindle's Road, and it's where my research has revealed is where the rest of the Howicks lived. So Job Howick had a house round there. So Weymouth Villas is just behind me. Sit there. That's Weymouth Villas there, and that's where Abraham lived. I've looked at the census record, and now I'm going to walk you past Weymouth Villas, and I'm just going to give you a view of Trindle's Road. So he lived there in that house on the corner, of traffic. And now we're just walking into Trindles Road, so I'm just going to sort of stand just around the corner so you can get a view of Trindles Road, and then I'm just going to turn around so you can see Trindles Road behind me. So a lot of the rest of the Howicks that I've looked at on ancestry.co.uk using the census records lived either side of this road. This is all Trindles Road. And on a visit here a few years ago, I actually spoke to a lady who worked in a small sweet shop which is at the far end of Trindles Road, and she was telling me that Howick was a surname that she recognised, and I think there have been a few Howicks that have lived in this road. I don't know whether any do to the present day, this is 2016, the end of September, but certainly years ago they did live here. So as you can see, geographically, it really isn't a huge distance from the train station. And this is what Trindles Road looks like today, looking at it from the other end. So this is the opposite end to the train station. I do have census records that actually list where the Howicks lived either side of this road. I can't remember offhand what the numbers or names and addresses were, but I do have the records, and they're all taken from ancestry.co.uk. So that's Trindles Road, and we're just going to walk back to Nutfield train station again. There is Weymouth Villas behind me. That was where Abraham Howick lived. And we're just going to walk back the other way. Just cross over to here, hopefully you'll get a better view behind me of Weymouth Villas. So you can see how near everything was to the train station. I'm not sure when this part of the railway was built, but certainly it would have been in use in Abraham's time. There's one last look at the properties. Oh, I can hear a car, so let's just go back. Just wait till the car's gone. That's it. And there you go, Trindles Road, the home of the Howicks. Weymouth Villas on the corner, and I've already shown you from the bridge on Nutfield Station just how near, you know, the property was. So we're now going to walk back round to the train station, and here we are, we're just approaching Nutfield train station again. And here we are, back again. Okay, I've come here to Red Hill train station, which is one stop back from Nutfield, which is where Abraham Howick had his coal yard. Abraham had a son called Job Howick, and Job, I discovered, was a steam train driver, and he actually he was employed by the South East and Chatham Railway Company, and he drove regular steam train service between Red Hill and Three Bridges. And here is the census of 1911, which lists Job as being the driver. Okay, so the next entry I want to show you is taken from the 1940 log record. Presumably the drivers had to log in and out when they reported for duty or when they were driving steam trains, and this is dated the 17th of January 1940, and it lists Job Howick, driver, Three Bridges, and here is the log record. And now we have the log record dated the 15th of January 1941, so this was the following year, and this still lists Job Howick as being the engine driver from Red Hill to Three Bridges. And again, this is the log entry. You can find these on ancestry.co.uk. It's brilliant that they're released. And this last little piece, this last logbook entry I want to show you is Job Howick is listed in the Railway Company logbook, and it's the London, Brighton and South Coast line, and he's listed as being the driver at Three Bridges, and the date is week ending May the 11th, 1938. So this lists Job Howick. I can't say for definite whether Job actually drove the coal train and took coal backwards and forwards to Abraham Howick's coal yard, which is in Nutfield, which is in the opposite direction. The direction that's back that way is the City of London, Croydon. But it is very likely that Job did drive the train that took coal to Abraham's coal yard. The strange part of this particular video is that if I turn the camera this way, I actually work in a building that's almost just behind me. I work in a building that's sort of just over there behind the trees, which is kind of ironic considering I've done all this research. We can't actually say, you know, that Job did drive the coal backwards and forwards to Abraham's coal yard. But standing here is quite nice, and you get a sense of what the old Red Hill station must have been like. Red Hill is still a fairly unchanged train station, so I can imagine, you know, that it's still pretty much as it was. There's an old bridge behind me just further up the track, which I think has been there a long time. But it's nice to stand here and get a feeling for my father's ancestors, and you know, the fact that he did drive a train backwards and forwards along this line. We're standing here in Salfords, which is in Hawley, and we've come here to look at the cottage behind me, which is called Axland's Cottage. Now, George Howick lived at number 2 Axland's cottages. There were 4 cottages according to the census records, but the 3 remaining cottages have long since been demolished. They were demolished sometime in the 1970s. This cottage behind me is the only one that remains, and the relevance of it to the Howick family history is that this is where George is listed in the census returns. He was living here, and he was living here when he was drafted for national service in the First World War. Now, I've got his service papers here, which would have been delivered to this cottage, the one next door. So George, if I just bring the camera this way, there would have been cottages that stood just over there as well, and that's where George was living. He was living with his parents, who you may remember were Daniel Howick and Alice Eliza Belton. According to the census records, the first time they're listed here in this road, this is Newhouse Lane in Salfords in Hawley, the first time that they're listed here would have been in the 1911 census. And they didn't move from here. There were various breaks in the census returns, but from what I can work out, they didn't leave here till around about 1923, 1924, when they moved from here up the road to Scott's Hill, which is off in that direction, to Pagefield's Cottage. And there's footage of Pagefield's Cottage coming up in my film shortly. So hopefully you can get a reasonable view of the cottage here. Now here is the census record. This is the front page of the census. This is for the year 1911, and Daniel Howick is listed as living on one of these cottages, and it's got the addresses 2 Axland Park Cottages, Hawley, but this now falls under the registration district of Salfords today. And in fact they only moved from here about, I would say, probably about a couple of miles up the road, which is also where Greenmead's farm stands, and obviously Salfords, where we're standing now, is also sort of on the borders of Outwood, so it ties in with the old parish of Burstow as well. So here is the front page of the census return, and this is for England and Wales, and the date on it is 1911, and it says that Daniel Howick was living at 2 Axland Park Cottages, but I think they were just called Axland Cottages, in Hawley. And if I hold that a little bit closer to the camera, you should be able to see it. These are great little pieces of information, and you can access these on ancestry.co.uk quite easily. So here we have George's enrolment papers. Now, George was living here when he was called up for national service. So this document, the original of this document, would have been delivered here to Axland's Cottage. He served in the 2nd Royal Sussex Regiment, and I know that from my research reveals that he served specifically in the Tank Corps. Now, he served in France for a year, which I've also uncovered, and in fact George was very lucky because many young men were posted to France in the First World War and they never came back. They were killed in combat. But George was lucky, he actually returned. And in fact his last army paycheck was delivered to Axland's Cottage. We have evidence of that. So he was very, very lucky to come back alive and to, continue living. He was 18 when he was enlisted in the First World War, and his occupation is listed as being a poultry farmer. And as you know from my video, which we've already talked about, and I've looked at Daniel Howick and Alice Eliza Belton, Alice Howick, they were living here when George was called up for national service. Now, this next piece is an actual copy taken from ancestry.co.uk, and this is the census of England and Wales dated 1911, and down in my left-hand corner, it'll be down in the bottom of the right-hand corner if you're watching this on the screen, it says Daniel Howick, Axland Cottage, Hawley, Surrey. And at this point, George is, I can't see how old he is. It could be 13 on the list. And he's at school. Don't know where he went to school round here, but he's listed as being a pupil at school. So there you go, that's the 1911 census. Now this next document that I'm going to show you on camera is also taken from ancestry.co.uk, and you can find these on the War Records section of Ancestry. And this is the actual award that George got. These are his medals. So as I've said already, he served in the 2nd Royal Sussex Regiment and he was in the Tank Corps. And if I hold this just a little bit closer, you should be able to see that is the piece of paper that tells you what medals he was awarded for active service in the First World War. It says George Howick, Royal Sussex Regiment. I think the rank says private. I think that says private. It was in the Tank Corps, and then it gives the actual medal registration numbers. So that's George's medal document. While I'm standing here, this is a good point to actually talk about a wonderful elderly gentleman who helped me tremendously in my research of this particular property, and his name is David Schenk. And without David's help, I probably would never have found this location. I wouldn't have known anything about Axland Cottages or the true location of it, because as I say, on the original enlistment papers, it lists the address as being Newbourne Cottage in Axlands Lane, which turned out to be incorrect, and in fact it was David Schenk's research that brought me here. Now it also says that George received and signed a receipt on the certificate of identity form for £2 advance of pay on the 22nd of November 1919, and the address given for the remainder of his pay was to be forwarded to Axland Cottage in Hawley, which of course is where we're standing, and it was still the home of his parents, and at that time he was granted a month's leave. So David's research says that it's reasonable to assume that he was home with his family at Axland Cottage here, which would have been Christmas 1919. And David's research also revealed that George's service record confirmed that George served 1 year and 6 months in France, but contained no other details as to his service or his time there. One interesting thing though, I remember my father talking about his father, George Howick, and Dad did mention that George had a damage to one of his thumbs on one of his hands, and wouldn't talk about it, didn't really want to talk about it. So I think it's reasonable to assume that during his time in France he suffered some sort of injury while he was over there and just didn't want to talk about it. So again, as with all the places that I've visited in this family history film, I think I've been very lucky to, I've come out to the Surrey countryside, around Outwood. Today we're in Salfords in Hawley, and the old parish of Burstow. I've been very lucky to see some beautiful places, and this again is a very, very pretty and beautiful place. So George was discharged from the Tank Regiment in 1919, and he was first able to vote in the electoral register of 1920. And again, this is taken from David Schenk's research, and David sent me a copy of the first listing of George in the electoral register for the year 1920. And it gives his address then as being here at Axland Cottage in Newhouse Lane. So lastly, we're just going to have a little walk past the cottage, and we're going to walk to the corner of St George's Road. It says there's a public access. I'm just going to have a little, just going to show you on camera, because that's very pretty as well. And there you go. But it is an absolutely beautiful place, like a lot of the places I've visited in this film. And as I say, George, the other cottages stood to the left of the picture now, and there would have been 4 of them. As you can see today, it's a modern property. So a really beautiful place. I've been very lucky to come here and visit this. So just as a last little piece, I'm just going to walk up this little footpath, just take a little stroll past just to give you an idea of geographically of what the place looked like. So we're going past the cottage and there's a little footpath. Presumably this has always been here. I'm not sure. Somewhere around the back here there's apparently a rather large country estate. I can't remember what it's called now. It's called something like Axlands Park or something like that. I'm not sure how far along here it is, but we'll just have a little walk along here just so I can say I've looked at the back. It is very, very hot today. I mean, it's beautiful weather, but it's extremely hot. I'm not going to go too far along here because there's other people's houses. But yes, the path seems to go on and on. It is lovely, really, really pretty here. Yeah, it goes on quite a way. But somewhere up there, I think, is a place called Axlands Park. So this is Greenmead's farm, which is on Daisy's Hill in Outwood, near Outwood, and I've had permission from the current lady who owns the property to come here today and take some footage to include in my father's short film. And the relevance of this beautiful old farm, as you can see, it is old, although there have been a few changes made to it. You can see modern panels in the roofing, but on the 10th of January 1928, my aunt, my dad's sister, Joan Mary Lane, was actually born in this farm, and before she passed away she asked me if I would do a bit of research and see if I could find out where the farm was. So it's very nice of the lady who currently owns the property to allow me to come here and take some footage of it. So Joan Mary Howick was born to George Howick and Rosemary Ann Wheel, Rose Howick, and they are my father's parents, and they married in 1928, and my dad's sister Joan Mary Howick was born the 10th of January 1928. So sadly my aunt has passed away, but at least I've been able to come here today, visit the property, take some footage, and be able to include it in my father's short film about the Howicks. I believe that Greenmead's farm is actually a Grade 2 listed building. You can see that it's had some minor alterations made to it, but it is a beautiful old property. If you look at some of the beaming, some of the beams. And this is where George and Rose Howick were living at the time that my dad's sister Joan Mary Howick was born. I'm not sure what year they actually moved here, but they were certainly living here when my aunt Joan Mary Howick was born. They moved from here to Pagefield's cottage, footage of which is coming up soon in the short film, and they ended up at the Outwood Baptist Chapel, which is in the other direction from Pagefield's and is also a short distance from where I'm standing now. And the Outwood Baptist Chapel is where Daniel Howick, who was the father of George Howick, he ended up as the part-time sermon taker. So all of the Howicks appeared to live here or around this area. I'm just going to do a little pan round, very, very slowly, just so you can see the surrounding countryside that's around Greenmead's farm. I think they've probably got horses because there's a beautiful open paddock over there. It is beautiful countryside, and although it's a very grim day, I'm filming this in January 2017. There's a little farm pond there. Let's just go round in a circle. And come back to a shot of Greenmead's farm. Greenmead's farm, Outwood, where my dad's sister Joan Mary Howick was born on the 10th of January 1928, and I knew her as Jo, Aunt Jo, and she was my aunt, and sadly she's passed away now. There's a little farm pond over there in the distance. And there's a lovely paddock here. Presumably they've probably got horses. And there you go, Greenmead's farm, Outwood, Daisy's Hill. And there we go, Fuller's Earthworks, otherwise known as Cockley Pits. And this is where Daniel Howick lived, somewhere around here, I suspect in a worker's cottage with Alice Howick, who was formerly Alice Eliza Belton. I'm just going to do a little pan round of the woods, just so you get a rough idea of what the place was like. Beautiful sun, it's a glorious day. Let's go right the way around. And right back to the earthworks. So there, just through the trees, is Fuller's Earthworks, which was known formerly as Cockley Pits. We've got a bit of a better view here. And somewhere around here would have been workers' cottages that Daniel Howick would have lived in with Alice Eliza Belton, otherwise known as Alice Howick. At some stage in the future, this is probably all going to be demolished. So it's a good time to look at it. So this is Pagefield's cottage, which is where George Howick was living with Rosemary Ann Wheel when they got married in the year 1928. And it's also the cottage where my father, John Peter Howick, was born. So this is it, it's called Pagefield's. It's got quite a bit of land next to it as well. It really is a very, very pretty old cottage. It's obviously quite old and has been here a long time. I'm going to do a pan round in a minute just to show you how lovely the countryside is around here. So there is a beautiful view of the Surrey countryside, and let's just pan round and come back to the cottage, which is Pagefield's, which is where my father was born and where his mother and father, George Howick and Rosemary Ann Wheel, were living when they got married in the year 1928. Pagefield's cottage. So we're back in Outwood in Surrey. It's interesting because we're back in the place where this film started, really. As you know, from the beginning of watching this film, you'll have seen me standing on Outwood Common with the Baptist Chapel to one side, and behind me was Outwood Windmill. So we've come back here today to Outwood, and this is particularly special for me. I'm absolutely loving every minute of being here because behind me is Brightly House. Today the property is divided into two halves. This half is called Brightly House that I'm standing in the garden now, and you'll have seen just now on the video, you'll have seen the old photos that I sourced from the Surrey History Centre in Woking of Brightly as it was in 1950, taken from a sale catalogue dated 1950, which was when part of the estate was sold off in its life. It's just brilliant to be able to come here. I'm so excited, and I've had a tour of the house inside. The gentleman who owns the house has been absolutely wonderful. He's given me a tour inside. I've seen the servants' quarters, I've seen the servants' entrance to the house, I've seen the staircase that goes up through the property. The other half of the property, which stands the other side of this hedge, is called Brightly Paddock. So this is Brightly House, that's Brightly Paddock. Now, the reason that this is so exciting and wonderful to be here is because I wanted to bring this film to its conclusion up to the present day, or as near to the present day as I could get. And the nearest that I could get was George Howick, who is my father's father. And the wonderful thing about standing here is that George Howick, who is my dad's dad, and Rosemary Ann Wheel, Rosemary Ann Howick, Rose Howick, both lived here and worked for the gentleman that owned this beautiful property. Now, the chap's name was Ernest Henham Hooker, and he was awarded the Queen's Gold Medal for Gallantry and Humanity for saving the lives of hundreds of Egyptians from one of the worst cholera outbreaks that there had been. And he lived in Brightly in Outwood in 1930. He actually died in 1930, aged 76. And I'm going to show you a picture now on camera. This is a photo of Ernest Henham Hooker. There he is. And this was an illustration done for a publication called The Graphic, and it's dated the 29th of December 1883, and he was aged 47 when this picture was done. So this is a picture of Ernest Henham Hooker himself. Fantastic, isn't it? And he was a fellow of the Institute of Chemists. He had the letters F.I.C. after his name, which stands for Fellow of the Institute of Chemists, and I believe that he probably developed a vaccine using his skills as a chemist. Being a Fellow of the Institute of Chemists would have meant that he had other people who were also Fellows of the Institute of Chemists to ask. They would have shared research, and so he developed a vaccine that saved the lives of hundreds of Egyptians. And you know, he was clearly quite an interesting chap, and he's just one of the many people who owned Brightly. The lovely thing is as you can see from the property, is that Brightly itself is still unchanged. The inside of the house, there's lots of lovely features that are totally original to the property. The timber, the windows, the gentleman's taken me round and taken me upstairs. I've been right up to the top of the house there, and I've looked at all the servants' rooms and the staircase that would have taken the servants up. The view, if I was to turn the camera the other way, over that way, is glorious. You're looking over, apparently to the right is Box Hill. In the distance you've got a view of Leith Hill, and of course if you look at the windows at the top of the property, you can see that the outlook was absolutely glorious. There's a couple of nice little details that I've picked up from my tour inside the house, which I'm going to tell you about. All of the windows of the master bedrooms that looked out this way were for the owners to look out. In other words, the master, the gentleman of the house, he would have been allowed to look out on the land, and all the servants' rooms in the house, they were not allowed actually to overlook the garden. The windows were not allowed to overlook the garden because they were the servants, they were the domestic staff. And so all of the rooms, which are still very nice for the servants and the domestic staff, their windows sort of overlook the side of the property. So the whole thing is just wonderful. It's been a treat to come here today. Now, the other nice thing about this is that my father was born here himself. Now, I've just been talking to the gentleman who owns the property, and he's invited a local chap round who's researched Outwood and the old parish of Burstow to see if he would know where Brightley Lodge was, or whereabouts it was, because Brightley Lodge is listed on the birth certificate as being where my father was born. Now, unfortunately, we can't quite work out where the lodge property would have been. The gentleman I've been speaking to here has said that there were 2 cottages attached to a dairy, which is just sort of in that direction up the road if you drive out of Brightley. And he said that there were 2 cottages, and that it's possible that one of those cottages, or the 2, might have also been known as the gardeners' lodges or the lodges, Brightley Lodge. But we're not actually sure. All we do know is that somewhere around here were the lodge properties, and they must have been fairly near, because both George Howick and Rosemary Ann Wheel, Rose Howick, would have needed to have come in on a daily basis. George was driving, he was a chauffeur for Erst Henham Hooker, and I'm going to show you a wonderful photograph in a minute of George standing in front of an Armstrong Siddeley motor car that was the property of Erst Henham Hooker, and this was the car that George drove Henham Hooker backwards and forwards to functions in London. He would have driven from Outwood. Maybe he drove him to the Institute of Chemists for various lunches or functions. It's just lovely to think of him doing this. There were other domestic servants living in Brightley as well. There was a lady by the name of Florence Hollingshoe who lived here and was a domestic. There was also a lady by the name of Eileen Elizabeth Weiss, and we've just had a bit of additional information about her, which I'm going to write down before I leave today. Not directly connected to the Howicks, but quite an interesting story there. And also there was Anna Sophia Henham Hooker, who lived here as well. I think that was Henham Hooker's daughter. So it's just wonderful to be here. So I'm just going to show you now. I'm going to hold up to the camera these 2 birth certificates. So this birth certificate is for my father, John Peter Howick. Yep, let's get it up the right way. There you go. That's the birth certificate, and if I read it to you, it says 7th of May 1930, Brightley Lodge, Outwood, Burstow, and we're in the old parish of Burstow. I've talked about the old parish of Burstow in other parts of this film. And a boy was born by the name of John Peter Howick, and he was born to George Howick and Rosemary Ann Howick, formerly Rosemary Ann Wheel. George Howick's job title at this stage, his position, was chauffeur, and John Peter Howick was born at Brightley Lodge. So here we are, 31st of May 1930, and this is where my dad was born. And also the other certificate which I have here, which I'm going to show you. Okay, there's another piece of paper. And this is the birth certificate for the 8th of March 1933, Brightley Lodge, Outwood, Burstow. And this is for Raymond George Howick, who sadly passed away several years ago. Boy, born to George Howick and Rosemary Ann Howick, formerly Wheel. And again, the father was George Howick, domestic, and the mother was Rosemary Ann Wheel. And again, there you go, yes, that's when the birth was registered. So there you go, fantastic. Now I'm standing at the side of the picture to be able to sort of show you really how beautiful the house is. The interior doesn't disappoint, it's really lovely. The current owners have loved this property. They've lived here for a number of years, few years. The gentleman himself is still keen to know more about the inside and the history of his house, and I'm probably going to help him do that as a thank you for allowing me to come here, because it really is wonderful to be here. But this photo I'm going to show you, I think you're going to love, and is really special. This photo is the only photo in existence of George Howick in his time as a chauffeur. And I'm convinced, I can't prove this, but I'm convinced that this photo was actually taken in the driveway one day outside this property brightly, and somebody got George to pose for this photo. So here he is. I'm going to hold it a little bit closer to the camera. And there's George, and he's standing in front of the motor car that was owned by Ayres Tenham Hooker. The car was owned by Ayres Tenham Hooker. I had some help from the Surrey Vintage Vehicle Society, who helped me do a bit of research with this photo. And the actual photo itself is actually about that big. And what I did a few years ago, before I found out that George was a driver for Ayres Tenham Hooker here at Brightly, was I found this photo, I took it to a photographic specialist, I had it enlarged, and the chap also framed it, and then I presented it to my father that Christmas for a Christmas present. And the owner has really loved seeing this photo, because, as I say, this photo was taken somewhere out in the front drive here at Brightly. So to be able to come back here, and this is now 2017 when I'm filming this, it's very, very exciting to be able to come here, bring this very, very historic photo back to where it was taken. So I'm just going to let you have another look at the photo. And as I say, the motor car itself is an Armstrong Siddeley. Beautiful, beautiful car. So that's fantastic. I'm just going to put this down. So, you know, I can't say how thrilled I am. There's so many people that have helped contribute to my research, that have welcomed me to the properties that they own. I've been to some, I think you'll agree once you've watched this film, there have been some wonderful places that I've been allowed to visit and take video footage. You know, it's very, very good, and it really does show the best of human nature, that people have embraced what I've been asking of them. I mean, to be here is just wonderful, and I think you'll agree. I'm just going to move out of the way in a minute so you can get a proper look at Brightly, because it is a beautiful house. Hopefully you're getting a proper shot of it. So it's a real privilege to be able to come to places like this where my father's ancestors lived, and I'd like to thank on camera all of the people that have contributed to my research. I've met some really wonderful people. I'm thinking of the owners of South Hale Farm, who weren't directly connected to my father's ancestors, but who invited me to their house. They reunited 3 generations of the Howicks, so I could include them in my film. That's myself and 2 other people. The owners of Doggett's or Doghurst Farm, which you've seen in this film, they invited me to their property. They took on that property in 1968 when we moved from Watford back to our house in October of that year, 1968. So it was wonderful of them to invite me to their property. And then there's the Surrey History Centre, Woking. in Woking, all the staff there have helped me, the London Metropolitan Archive staff, the National Archive in Kew. I've hopefully credited everybody, the owners of Brightly here. Hopefully I've credited everybody in my film, but I would like to go on camera and say thank you to you all for making my father's film so absolutely fantastic. So I'm just going to step away. We're going to get some other shots of Brightly in a minute. The gentleman's kindly going to take me round and we're just going to have a look at some other shots, but I'm just going to step away and say this film has been made with all my love to my dad, John Peter Howick. I hope you've enjoyed watching this film. I hope you've learned a bit about your ancestors a bit more, and I hope you've really, you know, enjoyed the film, because that's the point of it. So I'm going to say goodbye to you all, and I'm going to step away and leave you with a beautiful shot of this gorgeous house. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. So I've taken the camera off the tripod, and if we turn away from the house, as you can see, this dividing hedge divides Brightly House from Brightly Paddock, and the gentleman took me up the end of the garden, which is absolutely beautiful. They've got a lovely little rose arch here. Look at that, isn't that lovely? And if we walk through here, let's go through the arch. He showed me something that's absolutely fascinating that I'm going to show you. Now, the outlook here is absolutely glorious. Now, this metal fencing that we're approaching, he reckons is original. So this was part of Brightly, and you know, here, and if you look in the distance, I'm going to walk over there in a minute, that is the outlook from Brightly House. Look at that, isn't that absolutely beautiful? It's glorious. And there's public access over there. Apparently it can take you back to the footpath. If I turn the camera this way, this little path actually goes round to Brightly Paddock, leads round the back, and apparently there's clay piping under the soil on the left there, where you can see the little, there's like a ditch, well, there is a ditch there, and that was apparently designed for drainage, and the path goes right the way round the back. So that's quite wonderful to see. And if I go back this way, there's Brightly House, there's the house that we've just been looking at in the previous clip. And then if I turn the camera gently this way, you'll see the ditch goes round the other side, and there's a property right over there in the distance. Absolutely fantastic. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to go through the gate, go through the metal gate, and we're just going to walk over here, and we're going to have a look at the glorious view. We're going to walk across this bit of grass. So this is right out the back of Brightly House. Absolutely fantastic view. And in the distance on the left you can see Leith Hill. You should be able to see Leith Hill. And over on the right, I believe, is Box Hill, I think he said. I can actually see rabbits in the distance. But let's just go to the top of this little hill here and have a look. But isn't it absolutely beautiful? I think you'll agree on camera. So this is the outlook. And somewhere down here, the gentleman said is a public right-of-way, public access. So you can go back onto a public footpath. But if I lift the camera up, you should be able to see a glorious view. Leith Hill over there. And if I turn the camera that way, fields, and it's just beautiful, it's just lovely. And if I go round in a big circle, and there is Brightly House. So you can see that from the windows at the top of the property, the servants, not the servants, sorry, the master of the house and everybody, they had just a glorious, glorious view of Leith Hill. And if I turn the camera around again, this is the view that Erst Henham Hooker would have looked out on. In the distance there's a plane landing, because I think there's Red Hill, I think it might be Gatwick or Red Hill Aerodrome over there. Isn't it beautiful? Absolutely glorious. So let's walk back towards Brightley House, across this beautiful field and back through the little metal gate. You just can't help but fall in love with this property and being here, and it's just wonderful. And there you can see the house. Let's go back to the gate. Let's look at the little metal gate again. I think he's probably right. I think this gate is original. And then let's just very, very slowly turn the camera around and look at the view. Beautiful. Let's go back through the gate. That's it. Back through the gate. Shut the gate. That's it. And back up to the house, back into the garden again, and back up to the house. Absolutely glorious. And there we are. Brightley House. Wonderful.